So the next centre to consider is Bath. Dr. Holman was director of the centre at Bath, which was based at the Royal United Hospital in Bath, from around 1977 to 1986. And then in relation to the period from 1986, we see Dr. Thomas and Dr. Graham Smith's names on the annual return for 1986 as co-directors, and then Dr. Smith as the sole director in the annual returns from 1987 onwards. Bath, in common with other centres in this particular region, was served by the South West Regional Transfusion Centre in Bristol. If we pick up the available information with the annual returns, starting with 1977, HCDO 301135, we can see 6 patients treated during that year. The treatment in greatest use was the Cutter's treatment, so commercial concentrate coate, just over 93,000. We can see cryoprecipitate, however, was still in fairly substantial use, 41,485. And then the product least used was NHS concentrate, a little over 19,000. When we get to the following year, it's HCDO 301229. We can see there no cryoprecipitate used at all. The main product in use there is Factor VIII, the Armour product, a little over 32,000 units, followed by NHS concentrate, a little over 23,000 units, and then a small amount of Haemophilia used, 1,500 units. Then if we go to 1979, HCDO 301298, page 2, we can see a slight shift, again cryoprecipitate not in use at all, but the product in greatest use in that year is NHS concentrate, 41,500, followed then by Haemophilia, 13,500, and a very small amount of the Armour product Factor VIII, just over 500 units. There's a similar picture for 1980, HCDO 301392, where we can see the product in greatest use there. Well, it's probably a close run thing, in fact, between the NHS concentrate and Factor VIII, but still no cryoprecipitate for Haemophilia A patients. Cryoprecipitate there reserved for the treatment of von Willebrand's. We've got just under 70,000 units of the Factor VIII product used only in hospitals, so not there used, it would seem, for home treatment. And then fairly substantial uses of NHS concentrate, hospital and home. And then a small amount of cryobuline used hospital and for home treatment. If we then move to HCDO 301491, we're here in 1981, and the number of patients treated there is 7. We can see there that the main product in use is NHS concentrate. Totaling the amount used in hospital and home, it's just under 90,000 units. And then significantly more, therefore, than the commercial concentrates in use, which are a little over 9,000 of Armour product, and then about 6,500 or so of cryobuline in use. HCDO 301594 gives us the picture for 1982. We can see cryoprecipitate used only for von Willebrand's patients, and the overwhelming picture from that year is the use of NHS concentrates. So 230,000 in total hospital and home treatment, with the only commercial product being used that year, cryobuline, around 10,500 units. If we then go to 1983, HCDO 301690. We can see again, NHS concentrates are by far and away the main product in use, 92,000 odd in hospital, 131,000 home treatment. The only commercial product in use is cryobuline. In fact, I've misread the figure there, sorry, sir, because there's an additional one. So it's still NHS concentrates in greatest use, but cryobuline used to a fairly considerable extent as well, just under 65,000 hospital, and then a little over 6,000 for home treatment. A very small usage of cryoprecipitate for haemophilia A patients, just 320 units, and then a slightly greater use of cryoprecipitate for von Willebrand's patients. And then, so that's 1983. If we go to 1984, HCDO 301787. We can see that in 1984, cryoprecipitate features again, much less than concentrate, but nonetheless an increase on the previous year, 13,000 used in hospital. In relation to concentrates, it's a fairly similar amount used overall as between NHS concentrates and cryobuline. So the NHS concentrate is no, I'm sorry. I'm missing digits or reading in extra digits. No, it's cryobuline is the 81,000 odd, I think.
Are we looking at the same page?
Yes, we are. But I'm misreading some of the digits, sir. So if we look at the NHS concentrates, that seems to be the product in greatest use by quite a margin still.
In home treatment?
In home treatment, 100,870. Used to a lesser extent in hospital, yes. 7,390. In relation to cryobuline, used to a relatively significant extent for home treatment, 71,745. So not as much as NHS concentrates, yes, but still in substantial usage. And then used a little more than the concentrates, than the NHS concentrates for hospital treatment, 10,227.
Yes, they're almost mirror images of each other, with the use in hospital being a tenth of that at home.
Yeah. So that's the picture from 1984. We don't have, I'm afraid, any other information that would assist in casting any light on approach to treatment, treatment policies, priorities, or whether particular products were used for particular cohorts of patients. In terms of knowledge of risk of hepatitis or HIV, again, very little by way of contemporaneous documentation. Dr. Holman did attend a number of UK HCDO meetings in his capacity as director. So he was at UK HCDO meetings 79, 81 and 82, for example. He was also at the meeting in October 1983 when we had the discussion of AIDS and the use of commercial concentrates and the possibility of reversion to cryoprecipitate. I don't think there were any contributions from him recorded in any of the minutes. There's an occasional documentation relating to reporting of issues such as hepatitis. So we can see that at HCDO 40257_001. We've got that, Shem, HCDO 40257_001. So this is a report being made to Ms Spooner at Oxford as part of the ongoing hepatitis survey from the Royal United Hospital in Bath. This is April of 1980. We can see their description to jaundice developed, that's a reference in April 1980, and then various symptoms and signs set out, including jaundice. and anorexia, nausea, etc. And then the present condition of the patient is described as unwell but ambulant. We don't, I'm afraid, have any information about the numbers of patients who may have been infected with hepatitis. There is some witness evidence describing hepatitis C testing and diagnosis. One witness has told the inquiry of being informed of their hepatitis C diagnosis in August 1991. He explains that he was told that they'd suspected it since 1988 due to liver function test results, although he wasn't told the suspicion at the time. In terms of the arrangements for the care and treatment of patients found to be hepatitis C positive, if we go to NHBT 0075690, we can see there a letter from Dr. J. Graham Smith, the consultant haematologist at Bath, August 1991, to the Regional Transfusion Centre, and he's asking for, or he's responding to a request for information about a gastroenterologist or hepatologist to be able to undertake the clinical care of individuals found to be hepatitis C antibody positive. And the suggestion is made of a Dr. Davis at the Royal United Hospital, and indeed Dr. Davis confirmed in October of 1991 that he would be happy to be involved in the follow-up in relation to patients who are hepatitis C positive. And then in relation to HIV, the only information we presently have is information from UKHCDO. If we go to INQY 30250, INQY 40250. Go to the second page. Bath is towards the bottom of the page, Centre 28. It shows a report of one patient testing positive by reference to 1983, which would presumably be a reference to a retrospective testing on a stored sample, 2 in 1985, giving a total of 3 cases. So that is the extent of the information that we have. We don't have any contemporaneous documentation relating to the process of testing or how patients were informed of their diagnosis. Can I then come to the Salisbury Center? The directors at Salisbury were first of all Dr. Pinkerton and then Dr. Parry. Dr. Pinkerton was a pathologist by background, and then he was succeeded by Dr. Parry in or around February 1984. The centre in Salisbury was designated as a centre in 1976. In terms of numbers of patients treated, again, it was a relatively small centre, so the annual returns suggest a range of between about 4 to 11 patients with haemophilia A in the years from 1976 onwards, 1 to 4 patients with haemophilia B, and 1 patient with von Willebrand's. And if we pick up the picture in relation to the blood product usage from the returns, I'm just going to describe what the returns show for the first 2 or 3 years we have, and then we'll look at the documents from 1980 onwards. So 1976 shows treatment exclusively with cryoprecipitate for patients with haemophilia and von Willebrand's disease, with haemophilia A and von Willebrand's, and plasma for Christmas disease patients. 1977 shows exclusively treatment with cryoprecipitate for patients with haemophilia and NHS factor 9 concentrate for patients with haemophilia B. We don't have the return for 1978. 1979 shows treatment with cryoprecipitate and then the first commercial concentrate, Haemophil. The amounts used are relatively small, 1,820 units of cryo, 3,230 units of haemophil, and then the haemophilia B patients still treated with NHS factor 9. If we then pick up the picture in 1980 at HCDO 301464, and we can see that small centre, 5 haemophilia A patients treated during the year 1 von Willebrands. It looks as though the von Willebrands patient was treated exclusively with cryobuline in that year. And then in terms of haemophilia A, we have some usage of cryoprecipitate, and then NHS concentrates, and then some use of a range of commercial concentrates, factor 8, haemophil, and cryobuline all used. It's a slightly curious way in which the volumes are expressed. But in any event, those are the products used in 1980. No cryoprecipitate there, as I say, for von Willebrand's disease, which is comparatively unusual to see. 1981, HCDO 301565. Shows the treatment of 7 haemophilia A patients that year, no von Willebrand's. You'll see no cryoprecipitate used at all. And then we have NHS concentrate used. That's the largest amount used overall, 21,832 units. But then 3 different types of commercial concentrate used, factor 8, 11,000 plus, cryobuline just under 7,000, and then haemophil 2,720. When we come to 1982, HCDO 301663, again, we've got 7 patients with haemophilia A treated, and again, no cryoprecipitate used at all. It's not a wildly different picture from the previous year, so the main product in use there, NHS concentrates, then haemophil, roughly a little under half the amount used there, and then we have factor 8 and cryobuline used as well. 1983, HCDO 301759 shows no cryoprecipitate at all, but a significant increase in the volume of NHS concentrate used. So nearly 86,000 units in hospital and nearly 90,000 units for home treatment. And then we see 34,125 units of ARMA, and then 2 further commercial concentrates in use, haemophil, roughly 13,500 units, and co-8, 1,400. And then lastly, 1984, HCDO 301852, again, no cryoprecipitate at all, and indeed, according to this, no home treatment at all. The main product used there is the NHS concentrate, 174,000 units in hospital, contrasted with 12,600 units of factor 8 and just under 15,000 units of co-8. So mainly NHS concentrates, but with some commercial products being used. So that's the picture in relation to product usage. We have no information which helps understand why products were used in the way they were, or whether particular products were used for particular categories of patients. However, we can pick up in relation to Salisbury the issue of the donation to the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre and the subsequent contamination of the BPL batch. So if we start with DHSC 0002247_090, we looked at this letter earlier, but it helps to look at, I think, a more complete set of correspondence. So this is 4th of October 1984 from the Wessex Regional Transfusion Centre. sent to the various haemophilia centres in the region, including, we can see, Dr. Parry at Salisbury. And then we can see there in the second paragraph the concern that one of the donors whose plasma was incorporated in the pool for that particular BPL batch was now thought to be suffering from AIDS. If we then turn to DHSC 302247_093, we've got the follow-up letter. Again, we've looked at this earlier, so we can take this one quickly. 16th of October 1984, explaining to the recipients, which included Dr. Parry at the Salisbury Infirmary, that the diagnosis of AIDS had been confirmed. You'll see reference there to there's going to be a letter from Dr. Snape and from Dr. Krask. And then this: in the meantime, I've been asked to suggest that a policy of discreet surveillance be pursued. Quite what's meant by discreet surveillance by Dr. Barnes, I'm afraid it's unclear. And if we then go to DHSC 000418_050, this provides some information about what happened in relation to this particular donation. Obviously, the details of the donor are redacted. So it explains, on the 4th of October 1984, we were informed that a patient had been admitted to a local hospital with a history of breathlessness for the last 3 months and a productive cough. The patient's described there as a practicing homosexual. Next paragraph confirms that the diagnosis of AIDS was confirmed. We then see set out a donation history. So a donation made in November 82, a donation made in February 1983. There's reference there then to a donation made in Wessex, and that's the operative one for present purposes. It refers to regular donors having been sent the AIDS leaflet. An AIDS leaflet was received by the donor early in 1984, and of course we've heard evidence about that first AIDS leaflet in other evidence. There's reference then to what then happened to some of the donations, so whole blood transfused to a patient. And then over the page, who later died, over the page, reference to plasma-reduced red cells being transfused in another patient. And then we pick up the picture in relation to the BPL batch, haemophilia concentrate prepared batch number HL3186, 6th of April 1984. 7,000 plasma donations in the pool. 9 patients were transfused in Wales and 29 in Wessex. Other units immediately recalled. Total batch comprised 485 vials sent to Wessex BTC and 400 sent to Cardiff RTC. A total of 338 vials were recovered from Cardiff and 9 patients received the batch. In Wessex, a total of 187 vials were recovered and 29 patients received the batch. And then we can see an account of the distribution of the patients who received the batch. 4 at Dorchester, 3 at Salisbury, which is the centre with which we're currently concerned, 1 at Winchester, 8 at Trelaws, 8 at Southampton, which we've already looked at, and 5 at Portsmouth, giving the total of 29. And there's further information on the following page about what happened to the donor who died in November 1984. There's then 2 letters on the 20th of November 1984 with general advice about how the Haemophilia Centre should proceed. And if we go to CBLA 5010_188, this is the letter that Dr. Krask wrote in relation to the batch HL3186, dated the 20th of November, And we can see the recipients there set out, including Dr. Parry at Salisbury. If we go over the page, we see the letter. He refers in the first paragraph to the donor, the donor's diagnosis of AIDS having been confirmed. Then Dr. Crass explains he has responsibility for the epidemiological follow-up of recipients to the batch. He says, I hope that we can obtain the maximum information from this unfortunate incident and devise methods for the prevention of the disease. We also need to confirm the association of HTLV3 infection and transfusion of factor VIII concentrate. And then if we go to the bottom of the page under the heading Risk to the Patient, he says, from the foregoing discussion, you'll see it's difficult to be certain of the precise risk of any recipient contracting AIDS, but the following facts may help you to appreciate the position. And then a number of matters set out, maybe something we'll want to come back to at a later stage when we see the kind of advice being given by Dr. Crask. If we go to the bottom of the page, we'll see, however, the methods of investigation that was being urged by Dr. Crask. First was identify all patients who received factor VIII match HL3186. The second then is follow-up of patients. So he was asking the Haemophilia Centre directors to follow up the identified patients at least 4 monthly intervals for 6 years. Further review should be undertaken if a patient becomes ill to exclude the possibility of an AIDS-related illness. And then there's a suggestion of selecting for each patient a control patient who's not received batch number HL3186. If we go over the page, he explains he's identified a set of record forms, forms JC1, JC2 and JC3. The first, which is a patient data and clinical features forms, he asks the Haemophilia Centre director to complete on initial visit and each follow-up and to return to him together with a specimen of serum for HTLV3 antibodies. And if we go a little further down the page, then the 4-monthly review process, he sets out what he's asking the Haemophilia Centre directors to do. Go to the bottom of the page. He then touches on the question of whether the patient should be told or not. The follow-up may be carried out using an alternative of 2 different strategies. One, if the patient has been informed of the risk associated with this contaminated batch of factor VIII, testing could be carried out on each specimen as it is obtained at each 4-monthly review. In addition, it would be wise to warn the index patient that his spouse may be at risk from contracting HTLV3 infection as a result of any sexual contact. A test for HTLV3 antibodies can be offered to directors at the time of follow-up of the index case. Follow-up can be arranged by the director or in collaboration with the GP as thought necessary. Top of the next page, an alternative strategy would be not to tell the patient of the risk involved, but to observe him at regular clinical review 4 monthly, to collect serum specimens for HTLV3 antibody examination and send them to me at Manchester. These would not be examined until 2 years after the initial exposure, or until the patient develops clinical features suggestive of AIDS, or testing is required by the Haemophilia Centre director. The ethical problems involved in these 2 alternative methods of follow-up are discussed in an appendix at the end of this letter. And then we can see a reference 2 paragraphs further down to investigation of spouses. This will be at the discretion of the Haemophilia Centre director and will depend upon whether it's decided to inform the index patient of the possibility that the batch of factor VIII was contaminated with HTLV3 virus. Question posed, should the patient be told? Ideally, I think he should, but this will depend on many factors, including the amount of anxiety concerning AIDS there is already present at the centre, and the degree to which the patient is capable of understanding the situation. Every effort should be made to encourage the patient to discuss the problem with his spouse and help them to face the problem together. The GP should also be informed by letter. And then there's a heading Other Preventative Measures. The first refers to warning patients that their sexual partner may be exposed to risk. And then he goes on to refer to the possibility of inactivation through heat treatment. If we go over the page, we'll see his ethical problem annex. I'm not going to go through that now because we're focusing on Salisbury, but you'll see he sets out what's said to be the pros and cons. It's only right to point out, if we go to the bottom of the page, Dr. Crask says, in my view, option 1 that's informing the patient and family is the only one tenable on moral and ethical grounds. So that's Dr. Krask's view, but it's being left to the Haemophilia Centre directors to determine for themselves.
Can we just go back to the page before this?
I think is it page 4, so you wanted? Or the next page?
Just give me a moment. I'm going to see the next page. Yes, it's underneath, should the patient be told. It's an insight into attitudes, perhaps, at the time. But the question mark appears to be over telling the patient.
Yes.
It does not appear to be over telling the GP.
It does not. You're absolutely right, sir. And then the two factors identified there as relevant was amount of anxiety concerning AIDS there is already present at the centre, which seems to be rather difficult to relate to the question of whether an individual patient should be told. And then, well, it might be thought a degree of paternalism, the question of whether the patient is capable of understanding the situation. Depends, I suppose, if that was talking about children, different questions as to capacity may arise, but then one would expect parents to be notified. In any event, we have that, and then if we go to page 7, there are then a number of forms. I don't propose to go through them, but over the following 5 or 6 pages, we see the forms which Dr. Krask is asking the directors to fill in. Just to complete the picture in relation to this issue, if we go to HHFT 301026_004, this is a letter from the Regional Medical Officer at the Wessex Regional Health Authority. It's the same date as Dr. Krask's letter, 20th of November 1984. And if we look at the bottom of the page, we can see that it was sent to Dr. Parry in Salisbury. If we go back to the top of the letter, first paragraph refers to the blood donation, says our transfusion centre was not aware of this until the patient was admitted to hospital for treatment. Next paragraph talks about the setting up of a working party by the Department of Health. We go to the next, it says this: I've discussed the subject of AIDS with 2 members of the working party and feel that in the first instance it would be strongly advisable for the patients who received batch number HL3186, a factor 8 concentrate, or their parents, to be told, with the emphasis that the benefits of treatment by factor 8 far outweigh the small risk of the patient developing AIDS. I hope you will agree to do this now and let me know thereafter. The public interest in this matter will almost certainly lead to further press inquiries. In Wessex before long, I would like to be able to say that all patients have been informed and that the situation is being closely monitored. So that was the advice emanating from the Regional Medical Officer. We don't, I'm afraid, know what action was taken at Salisbury in response to that advice. There is a letter at DHSC 0014952180. This is a letter the following year, September 1985. This is not specifically related to the BPL batch, but this is the other piece of contemporaneous documentation we have in relation to patients infected with HIV at Salisbury. It's from Dr. Parry, to whom it may concern. And we can see from the first paragraph, it shows that a child patient, at least I think the inference is probably that it's a child, with mild haemophilia was infected with HTLV3 at Salisbury. The purpose of the letter, it looks like it's to be used potentially to reassure schools or the like, or the particular patient's school. but telling that we have a child patient with mild haemophilia there infected. As I say, whether infected through the use of commercial concentrates or infected through the use of the particular batch, the documentation we have looked at doesn't enable us to determine. In terms of knowledge of risk of hepatitis and AIDS, Dr. Pinkerton and Dr. Parry were regular attenders at UK HCDO meetings. Dr. Pinkerton's there in 77. He's at a Haemophilia Center and Blood Transfusion Center Directors meeting in 78. He's at the Haemophilia Center Directors meeting in November of 78 and November of 79, at which, amongst other things, Dr. Krask presented a report of the Hepatitis Working Party. He was also there in the meeting in October 81, again at which Dr. Krask presented a pre-circulated report about hepatitis, and there was discussion about hepatitis and liver disease. Dr. Pinkerton was also at the directors' meeting in October 83, at which the issue of cryoprecipitate reversion to concentrate arose for discussion. The only other contemporaneous document which throws any particular light on state of knowledge is from March 84, TREL 40343_045. It's a letter dated the 2nd of March 84. It's from Dr. Barnes at Salisbury Oddsdock Hospital to Dr. Arenston about a particular patient. But if we go to the second page, we can see it was copied to Dr. Parry, and then it's actually what's set out in handwriting at the bottom that's of relevance for border purposes. Interesting to see in the Lancet that Finnish cryoprecipitate doesn't have the same effect on T cells as concentrate does. And that's a reference to an article in the Lancet. We'll just look at briefly RLIT 40119. It's February the 25th, 1984. And we can see, I won't go through the detail of it, but it's the article on the left-hand side, normal T-cell subset ratios in patients with severe haemophilia A treated with cryoprecipitate. So some
and it's written by who?
If we go to the bottom of that column, we can see it's written by 4 individuals representing the Finnish Red Cross Blood Transfusion Service in Helsinki. So some knowledge within Salisbury and being sent to Dr. Parry of issues relating to concentrates versus cryoprecipitate in early 1984. In terms then of figures relating to numbers infected, the data that we have from UKHCDO suggests 3 patients tested positive for HIV in 1985. I'm afraid, as things currently stand, we've no way of knowing whether all or any of those 3 patients were patients who'd received the contaminated, implicated BPL batch. You'll recall that there were 3 patients at Salisbury who'd received that batch. Whether those are the same 3 patients who tested positive for HDLV3, it's not possible to know. In relation to hepatitis C, no information, I'm afraid, about numbers of patients infected with hepatitis C. You do, sir, have evidence from an individual treated at the centre who recalls being informed of their hepatitis C status in the mid-1990s and doesn't recall being informed that he was going to be tested for hepatitis C. So that's the picture then in relation to Salisbury. Although Winchester is very short, it's not 6 seconds short, which is the time between now and 4:30. And I don't want to, although it is short and there are a few documents, I don't particularly want to rush through it. No. Perhaps we could pick that up at 10.
Well, it'll be just as short at 10 as it would be now. So let's take a break 10 o'clock tomorrow we start with Winchester.